The deception that won World War II. It's June 6, 1944. The sun is coming up over the beaches of Normandy. Deep in the forests of Prussia, Adolf Hitler is still asleep in his command bunker. His generals are getting frantic reports. Allied paratroopers have landed behind their lines. Warships are bombarding 5 different beaches. Thousands of ships are sitting just offshore. But nobody wakes Hitler up. Why? Because for months, German intelligence has been telling them the same thing. Normandy is just a distraction. The real invasion is coming at Calais. By the time Hitler finally wakes up, over 150,000 Allied soldiers are already on the beaches. The lie that would win the war had just become reality. Picture the scene inside Hitler's headquarters. The room is dark. Maps are spread out everywhere, showing France, Belgium, and the English Channel. Little pins mark where all the German divisions are, red pins for threats, blue pins for reserves. In the corner, a radio keeps crackling with static, carrying panicked voices from the battlefield, all asking for help. Hitler walks in slowly, hands behind his back. His officers stand up. Nobody wants to speak first. He stares at the map, looking at Normandy and the 5 invasion points. But his eyes keep drifting north to Calais, where his biggest and best army, the 15th Army, is just sitting there doing nothing. Someone finally speaks up. This has to be a diversion. Patton's army hasn't moved yet. Calais is still the real target. Hitler nods. He trusts the intelligence, reports. He especially trusts Garbo, a Spanish double agent who has been sending perfect information for 2 years. But while they're talking, hundreds of men are dying on Omaha Beach, Utah Beach, and Gold Beach. The Atlantic Wall, the massive fortress Germany built to protect Europe, is breaking apart. Hitler doesn't know it yet, but the war is basically already over. For months, Berlin had been celebrating what they thought was their greatest intelligence victory. Agent Garbo, whose German codename was Alaric, was their star spy. He was supposedly a Spanish businessman who hated communism and supported Germany. According to his reports, he had spies everywhere in Britain. Dock workers in Liverpool, military clerks in Scotland, even someone inside the War Office. His information was detailed, precise, and seemed totally reliable. In April, Garbo confirmed what the Germans wanted to believe. The Allies were gathering a huge force in southeastern England. General George Patton was commanding the 1st U.S. Army Group. 150,000 men, 1,600 tanks, whole divisions ready to go. Their target, Calais. It made perfect sense. Calais was the shortest route to Germany. Normandy was just a fake attack, meant to pull German troops away before the real punch at Calais. Berlin believed every word. Hitler believed it. So the 15th Army stayed right where it was. 19 divisions, 150,000 men, all dug in along the Belgian and northern French coast waiting for Patton to show up. When the landing started on June 6, the German High Command barely reacted. One of their top generals, Rommel, was away visiting his wife for her birthday. Another commander delayed his response. Hitler was asleep. Even when the reports got worse, showing the Allies were advancing, nobody panicked. Why? Because Garbo had sent another message the night before. Normandy is the diversion. Calais is next. Don't move your reserves. And they listened. In following that advice, Nazi Germany basically signed its own death certificate. By noon, the numbers started painting a very different picture. At Omaha Beach, 34,000 American troops had landed. They took 2,400 casualties, but they captured the high ground. At Utah Beach, 23,000 men landed and linked up with the paratroopers. At Gold, Juno, and Sword Beaches, 75,000 British and Canadian forces came ashore and secured key roads. Add in the 23,000 paratroopers who dropped behind German lines, capturing bridges and blocking roads. In just the first 12 hours, 156,000 Allied soldiers were committed to the invasion. Supporting them offshore were 7,000 ships with almost 200,000 sailors, plus nearly 12,000 aircraft providing air cover. And still, the 15th Army didn't move, because the intelligence kept saying this isn't the main attack. But inside the German headquarters, Doubt started creeping in. A young officer points at the map. "Sir, look at the scale of these landings." Someone else interrupts. But Patton still hasn't moved. His army group is still in England. Another voice asks, "Then where are his tanks?" Silence. Another report arrives, decoded and handed to Hitler. It shows Allied bombing targets over the past 3 months. Calais railway hubs hit 12 times. Normandy railway hubs hit 37 times. Bridges over the Seine River, 18 out of 24 destroyed. Roads in Normandy systematically devastated. The pattern had been there for months, but they ignored it because Garbo said it was all deception to fool them. Then the production numbers arrived. Allied industrial output from January to May 1944. 11,000 Sherman tanks, 27,000 aircraft, 31,000 landing craft, 170,000 trucks. Compare that to German production in the same period. 3,200 panzers, 9,500 aircraft, 26,000 trucks. One general stares at the numbers, his voice quiet. They didn't need to deceive us. They could have landed anywhere. Another report from the battlefield. The Panzer Lair division got their orders to move at 2:30 in the afternoon on June 6th. They should have reached Normandy in 18 hours. They actually arrived on June 9th, 3 days late. Why? Allied air superiority. Every road bombed. Every bridge destroyed. The tanks had to travel at night through forests, hiding under camouflage. Of the 182 tanks that started the journey, only 134 arrived operational. The rest were destroyed from the air before they ever saw combat. Hitler looks at the map again. The pins haven't moved. Calais is still heavily guarded. The 15th Army is still waiting. But Normandy is bleeding and reinforcements aren't getting there. At 4 p.m., an urgent message from Rommel reaches headquarters. If the enemy gets a firm footing on land, our position will be catastrophic. We must throw them back into the sea before nightfall. But it's already past nightfall and they're still there. Hitler's hands grip the edge of the table. "Release the reserves," he says. Someone asks, "Which reserves, sir, to Normandy or to Calais?" A pause. "Both?" Hitler's jaw tightens. He doesn't answer because the answer is becoming clear, and it's unthinkable. 3 days after the landings, the Allies haven't been pushed back. They've expanded. The 5 separate beach zones are now connected into one continuous front, 50 miles wide and 10 miles deep in places. More ships arrive every hour with more tanks and more men, and the 15th Army is still standing at Calais. Inside Hitler's headquarters, a different kind of silence has settled. Not confident silence, but the silence of realization. An intelligence officer enters with a decoded British radio message. Just routine supply coordination, nothing special. Except for one detail. Patton's name is mentioned in past tense, previously assigned, no longer attached. The officer's hand shakes as he puts the paper on the desk. They disbanded his army group. Hitler looks up slowly. What? The 1st U.S. Army Group. It was never real. The room goes cold. Another officer speaks, barely above a whisper. The tanks we tracked in Kent were inflatable. The landing craft at Dover were plywood and canvas. The radio traffic was actors reading scripts. Someone laughs, not from humor but from shock. Garbo. Nobody answers at first. Then an intelligence analyst who's been quiet this whole time speaks up. Garbo sent 47 reports between January and June. Every single one confirmed Calais as the primary target. Every one cited independent sources, dock workers, clerks, officers, and we never verified a single source. We never met any of them. We only had Garbo's word. The analyst opens a folder. On June 5th, the night before the invasion, Garbo sent an urgent message. Normandy is the diversion. Calais remains the objective. Do not move the 15th Army. He looks up. It was sent at 3 a.m., 3 hours before the landings. We received it at 8 a.m., 5 hours late. Why? Because nobody was on duty to decode messages at 3 in the morning. After a bitter pause, he continues. Garbo even complained about the delay in his next message. Said if we'd acted faster, we could have stopped them. Hitler's face shows nothing, but his hands have stopped moving. The analyst goes on. He gave us everything we wanted to hear, confirmed every assumption we already believed, never contradicted us, never even asked for payment, just fed us certainty. Someone asks, where is he now? Unknown. But British intelligence awarded him an Iron Cross in absentia. The words hang in the air, an Iron Cross from Berlin, and likely a medal from London as well. Hitler's chief of operations finally speaks, his voice flat and emotionless. Sir Patton was never coming to Calais. Hitler stares at the map, at the pins still clustered in the north, at the 19 divisions that could have made a difference but didn't. Because one man, one Spanish clerk working from a London apartment, had convinced the entire German High Command to stand still while the war slipped away, not through force but through belief. Hitler's voice, when it comes, is quiet. How long have they been lying to us? His officer hesitates, then answers with the only truth left. From the beginning. Hitler closes his eyes. Not might be lost, was lost. The deception didn't begin on June 6th. It started 2 years earlier in 1942, in Lisbon. Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spanish chicken farmer with no military training, no intelligence experience, no connections. He walked into the British embassy and offered to spy for the Allies. They rejected him 3 times. So he went to the Germans instead, and they accepted. He invented an entire spy network. 27 sub-agents, all completely fictional. A Portuguese businessman in Liverpool, a Welsh fascist in Swansea, a Venezuelan student in Glasgow. He wrote reports from Lisbon using a travel guide and old magazines. He described troop movements he imagined, convoys he made up, military bases that didn't exist. And Berlin loved him. They paid him, praised him, gave him the codename Arabelle. When British intelligence finally realized what he'd done, they brought him to London, gave him a new codename, Garbo, and turned him into the most valuable weapon of the war. The mechanics of the trap were brilliant. First, give them truth. In 1943, Garbo reported the Allied invasion of North Africa before it happened. Berlin received the message after the landings had already begun. A delay in transmission, but the accuracy was undeniable. Hitler personally praised him. Second, build dependency. For 18 months, Garbo sent a steady stream of intelligence. Some true, some false, all believable. His network grew. His reports became required reading at the highest levels. German intelligence stopped questioning him and started protecting him. Third, exploit belief. By 1944, German intelligence didn't just trust Garbo, they needed him. Their own reconnaissance had collapsed. Allied air superiority made observation impossible. Agents in Britain were captured or turned. Garbo was all they had left. So when he said Calais, they believed Calais. Not because the evidence supported it, but because they had no other source to contradict him. The strategic consequences were catastrophic. The 15th Army, 150,000 men, the strongest force in Western Europe, stayed at Calais until July 25th. 7 weeks after D-Day. By the time they were released, the Allies had landed 1 million men, established a front 60 miles wide, and captured the deep-water port at Cherbourg. The window to push them back into the sea had closed forever. But the damage went deeper than just troop placement. Every gallon of fuel, every tank round, every replacement soldier sent to Normandy came at the expense of Calais. Rommel begged for reinforcements. He received only fractions, because the High Command still feared the real invasion. The Luftwaffe held back air reserves, waiting for Patton's Phantom Army to cross the Channel. By the time they committed fully, Allied fighters had established total air dominance. The German command structure fractured psychologically. Rommel argued for immediate counterattack. Other commanders urged caution. Hitler wavered. Nobody trusted their own judgment anymore because Garbo's intelligence had always been right until it wasn't. One intelligence officer after the war described it simply: "We didn't lose because we were deceived. We lost because we wanted to be deceived. Garbo told us what we already believed, and we built our entire strategy around a fantasy. The trap wasn't the lie, the trap was the truth they couldn't see, even when it was killing them." By June 10th, 5 days after the landings, German commanders knew Normandy was the main invasion. But the 15th Army still didn't move, because orders from Berlin said hold for Calais. And by the time those orders changed, the war had already turned. The war didn't end on June 6, 1944. It would grind on for 11 more months. Berlin wouldn't fall until May 1945, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. By August 1944, the Allies had broken out of Normandy. Paris was liberated. The German army was in full retreat. The 15th Army, when it finally engaged, was shattered in weeks. The divisions that could have stopped the invasion on the beaches were destroyed in the hedgerows and forests of France. 150,000 men gone. Not because they fought poorly, but because they fought too late. Rommel, who had warned of catastrophe, was forced to commit suicide in October, implicated in a plot against Hitler. Other commanders were dismissed, and Hitler retreated deeper into his bunker, surrounded by maps that no longer reflected reality, issuing orders to divisions that no longer existed. The man who won the war never fired a shot. Juan Pujol Garcia Garbo remained in London throughout the invasion, writing reports, inventing sources, feeding Berlin hope. On June 9th, the same day Hitler realized the truth, Garbo sent another message. I regret the delay in my warning of June 5th. Had you acted on my intelligence immediately, the Normandy diversion could have been crushed. Berlin responded with gratitude and an Iron Cross. He received the Order of the British Empire from King George VI the same year. The only person in history decorated by both sides in the same war. After 1945 he disappeared. He faked his own death and lived quietly in Venezuela until the 1980s when historians finally found him. In an interview near the end of his life, he was asked how he felt about deceiving an entire nation. He paused, then said simply, I didn't deceive them, they deceived themselves. I just let them. The lesson was carved into history. Wars are not only won with guns and tanks and ships, they are won with belief. And on June 6, 1944, Germany believed the wrong thing, not because the evidence was perfect, but because the lie was comfortable. By the time Hitler opened his eyes that morning, 156,000 Allied soldiers were already ashore, and the greatest deception operation in history had already succeeded. Not because it was clever, but because it told them exactly what they wanted to hear. In war, the most dangerous enemy is not the one at the gates, it's the one inside your own mind.